Our next guest has been with us a number of times, and we actually put together a little intro reel to introduce him.
Don't kill me. Oh, fuck.
How could you do it? How could you?
You make a sound louder than this, and I'll kill you. You understand? What the hell was that? Orders, sir. Oh, asshole. Whoever gives them, I don't know. Bullshit. But what the fuck is going on here?
All they said is that there'd been some sort of accident. My whole unit got flown in. We didn't even know what state we was in until we seen the license plates.
Shut up. All right now, y'all ready for some shit? Is you ready for some shit? That's right.
You are now about to witness the strength of street knowledge.
Not all music stars, as you know, are model citizens. Some have had run-ins with the law. That's certainly nothing new. But now a few musicians have taken that to new heights.
Their songs, they glamorize the lifestyle of gangs, guns, drugs.
Our art is a reflection of our reality. What you see when you go outside your door? You know what I see?
And it ain't glamorous.
Everybody, please welcome editor Billy Fox. Like I said, Billy's been with us before, so I can get away with certain things, and so it's kind of nice. You know, speaking of that, isn't it fun to be a celebrity?
I hate being
editors.
in front of people.
No, come on, editors
Why do
don't.
You think I'm an editor?
Editors don't get to be celebrities.
I don't know about celebrity.
Well, I mean, you get all this applause, you get all these people, you get to walk down the aisle after that really cool introduction.
Weird.
How often does that happen? By the way,
next to never. No.
When did celebrity or editors become celebrities? No. No, really. And when did that happen?
Who's spinning this whole thing?
When it didn't happen. Anyway, we're here to talk about well, Only the Brave, and we're also talking about Adobe Premiere used in it. How many people have actually seen the movie Only the Brave? Okay, so there's a few of you, and honestly, I urge you, if you, it's still probably playing somewhere here in Los Angeles, to go see it.
It's pretty much gone.
Is it really? I mean, there's got to be at least one or two
like,
screens.
Yeah, it might be one or two.
Yeah, well, anyway, it's a really good movie. I mean, it's a stunningly good movie. And it's one of those movies that, and I told him when I went and saw it, and when I came home that night, I sent him an email, and I pretty much said no words. It was, it's emotionally impactful. It is about the Granite Mountain Hotshots, a wildfire fighting team in Arizona that tragically met their end in a wildfire. And I'm not spoiling it because most people know the story, but it's one of those movies where you know the story, but it ends in a tragic way. How'd you get the gig? I mean, you didn't know the director.
I didn't know the director. I didn't know any of the producers. One of the producers I had worked with, Lorenzo Di Benaventura, I had done Four Brothers for. And my agent called me and says, you know, Joe Kosinski is looking for an editor for this movie. At the time, it was called Granite Mountain, and I'll probably refer to it as Granite Mountain. In my head, it's still Granite Mountain. Interviewed with Joe. Funny short story is that my wife and I love the movie Oblivion, and it's in our list of things we watch on a completely regular basis. I think Oblivion's just an amazing film.
It is a great movie.
And so it was great to meet him, and had a nice interview with him, and I got the gig. You know, you never know when you have those interviews. You go, I think it went well, and sometimes you get them.
Yeah, the reason I asked that cliche question, which is always the first question that one usually asks editors, how'd you get the gig, is that you used Adobe Premiere in this, and if you didn't know the director, how in the heck did you convince him to use an NLE that not a lot of studios are using? This is a big studio movie.
Yeah. Yeah, as you'll see in a piece that he's going to show you in a little
I'll
bit.
show you in a couple of minutes.
Yeah, I always, in between projects, kind of reinvent certain portions of the post-production process. And I look at every aspect of what I'm doing and what can we change, what can we do better, what can we make more efficient, what can we do that brings us closer to myself editing and the film in front of me. And you know, when I first met Joe, that wasn't part of the discussion, even though I had been watching Premiere for a number of years and watching its development and talking with some people at Premiere. And then, so I got the gig, and I had a breakfast with Joe, and I talked to him about certain things I'm interested in doing differently. The Next Lab I/O box at Photochem, the Next Lab Open Drive, and one of them was Premiere. I had a conversation with the folks at Adobe, and they basically said, we think we're ready, and I said, I think your system is ready. It's not going to be perfect, but I'm ready to do it. And so I talked to Joe about it, and he goes, go for it. I'm totally down with it. I said, we're going to have some bumps. It's not going to be perfect, and so we did. And we had so many things that we changed on this show before we started, that there were more things that we wanted to do. Myself and my first assistant, Jamie Clark, I said, okay, we've done enough. There's enough changes going on here. So there was a number of things that we wanted to do, and we decided to not do it for this project. Let's do it the next project.
Yeah, we've known each other for over 10 years, and Billy actually did one of our super meets, which I produced, right. And back in Amsterdam, right. Over 10 years ago. It was about 11 years ago. Yeah. He did the first super meet in Amsterdam, where he used Final Cut Pro. Right. He was one of the early adopters of Final Cut on a movie, I think it was Trader?
Trader.
It was Trader. And you seem to like to make your life difficult by using new NLEs.
Part of it is making your life a little difficult, but to a point. And, you know, whenever, you know, I'm always looking at competitive systems, and it can be NLEs, and it can be all kinds of other aspects of it. But, you know, I'm always looking for the better path. And Final Cut was a great system, enjoyed it for many, many years, and, you know, just keep on moving down the line.
Okay, well, I want to show this that was produced by Adobe, and it's a commercial, but it's really a good, well-produced. It's a really well. No, it is. You'll see. It's a really well-produced commercial on the making of Only the Brave. So hang in there, folks. Lights. Oops, shoot, sorry.
I want y'all to breathe in this beautiful vista, because you're never going to be able to look out into the wilds and see that pure beauty again.
This is the story of 20 Hotshot firefighters. We go through a number of fires with them. We get to know them very well, and then a bad fire happens at the end.
This is based on a true story and a very sad story. Joe wanted to be truthful and respectful as possible to the families.
This movie is very character-driven, and visual effects help add to that story. This was the first movie that I've ever edited on Premiere. My whole career has been moving from one editing system to another. There's always been that transition time that you're not fast. And in the case of Premiere, for me, being that I had a lot of experience with Final Cut, very quickly I was at speed.
I was very hesitant at first, but when I really started getting into it, I realized how much easier it is to get information in and out.
We did a variety of visual effects in-house within After Effects. When I initially started doing the final visual effects, it was a little bit terrifying because I am delivering my shots right next to ILM. I'm just a little guy sitting in my office across the hall from the director, and I have to deliver files that match their files exactly. And I was able to do that within After Effects, which was really cool.
The workflow in an Avid is you have to export out every shot and import it into After Effects. In Premiere, you can just dynamically link and send it straight into After Effects and get that work done. We were the first production to work on shared project. Every project has a name next to it, and whoever has that project open, that's who's working in it. To be able to have the projects and see who's in them, and then have them close and know what's available and what isn't, is a huge asset to Premiere.
We worked with Adobe development and all of our departments in Photochem to help them have a great experience in editorial. We provided our Next Lab to enable editorial and VFX to do their own pulls.
Everything was shot in 4K. All the camera negative would go into the Next Lab system and got transcoded to 2K. If Joe really wanted to see something in 4K, we can send EDL straight to Next Lab and have it transcode out to 4K.
Using Adobe's color correction tools, all color correction for all of our screenings and previews were all done in-house.
And then we also were creating DCPs in-house.
Normally with DCPs, you send them to an outside vendor. It takes about 72 hours turnaround. We would take from Premiere Pro, send it to Media Encoder, and then Media Encoder would use the Raptor plugin to encode a DCI standard DCP for us, which saved a lot of time, a lot of money. We made about 20 and screened in about 18 different theaters. It was really great.
This is the first time I've edited in 5.1. Dialogue, music, and effects can be quite complex using lots and lots of tracks. Adobe made it much cleaner to be able to have the dialogue just coming through your center speaker and then your effects and music coming from the left and rights. Using an external control surface and actually doing mixing where it's recording the control points and doing a real mix gave me a lot of things that I have been somewhat frustrated with before. I like an editing system where the system keeps rolling and you're able to gain momentum and a workflow. In Premiere's case, I just hit play and I start making changes, and it worked great.
All the tools are right there to make a film. You can do absolutely everything.
I think that it's an extreme golden time with the laptops or however you want to edit or need to edit. The editing system doesn't get in your way and allows you to facilitate the vision that you think in your head that you would like to be able to do, and the system says, yeah, I can do that.
It's a good commercial.
They did good.
I mean, it is. Like I was telling Carl from Adobe, you guys do good commercials. I mean, it's really well-produced, good commercials. So speaking of that, was there anything exaggerated in there? Was it all true?
It was all true.
Okay. That's good. I just got to ask that because sometimes commercials can be a little exaggerated. And anyway, so you convinced everybody to use Premiere. So let's talk a little bit about your process and the process of cutting Only the Brave. And talk about your process, the Billy Fox process, which is a little different than other people's editors' processes.
In regards to Premiere?
Yeah, well, and let's just talk about Only the Brave.
Well,
was the process any different than from the other movies that you've done? Do they change?
No, not really. I have a process. I mean, there is something that's changed in recent years. It used to be that when I'm working on an editor's cut, I would make what I would call a performance cut, and I would spend a ridiculous amount of time going through all of the performances and stringing out each line, every single line, and then go to the next line and the next line, and it was incredibly time-consuming. And then once I had it billed, actually cutting the scene happened quite quickly, and I did that for a very long time, and I would always fall behind in the schedule. And I changed a couple of years ago, and basically I kind of do a similar thing, but what I do now is I don't do the performance cut. I go through and I look at the performances, and I go through, and one of the things of editing that I hate the most, I despise, is building a first cut. I hate that process of, you know, what take, this line followed by this line followed by that line. And I determined that, and I realized that once I've got an incredibly ugly first cut built, then I go to town. Then it just becomes a whole other animal. So I decided to take that whole performance aspect of it, just build a scene, and it can be with the wrong takes. I'm not going to put in a take that people make mistakes, but I find the performances I kind of like, they're fine, and then I just build it. Then once it's built, then I start at the top, and I start molding it, and I start tweaking on the timing and tweaking on some performances. Then I go into performance land, and I start looking at each line a little bit, and oh, that's a better one, and I drop that one in. And it's this process of going from the cut back to dailies, back to the cut, and then at a certain point when the cut is starting, this is just one scene, just starting to take shape, kind of, I go into audio. And I spend a lot of time with audio. Audio is, in my...
Yeah, I read in an interview that you actually spend about
49% of my time in audio.
Time with audio and in sound effects.
I think that it's so critically important on so many levels that, in terms of dialogue, for example, before I even start building any effects or music, the dialogue of a given scene has to be perfectly clean, and I checkerboard. You want to put up?
Let's put up the timeline.
I checkerboard every single piece of audio. Yeah. And
yeah, what are all those pretty colors?
Well, Carl. The two greens are picture and dialogue. There should be a line there. Oh, great, perfect. Thank you. Yeah. There we go.
Awesome.
So right there is the separate. This is picture. This is audio. The first 4 tracks are dialogue. The next, whatever it would be, 12 tracks, is effects, and the bottom 4 tracks are stereo music. Actually, almost everything is stereo. Production is mono. These are mono tracks. So this is all sound effects, and this is all music. And then these are, hold on. This is optional music, and I'll turn one on, turn that off, you know, have things. And you'll notice, maybe not in this cut, but normally things are turned off where I have alternate audio cues, lines, all up in here. Also with picture, I checkerboard that also. And the reason being is I like to be able to, when I get into a trim world, I don't like really going into so-called trim where I open that splice and open that splice. I do it from time to time. But what I prefer doing is literally grabbing the world. I'll say if I'm zoomed into here and I'm going to tighten that trim, I just let things go underneath each other. And it also applies to sound. So that if I don't ever want two pieces of audio to butt up against each other because I'm out-cutting one or up-cutting another, that they go up like this and a little tighter, a little looser, a little tighter, a little looser. The other reason, particularly in sound for the checkerboarding, is because I spend a tremendous amount of time, and you saw in that presentation, is I spend a lot of time mixing. I calibrate my speakers. They're all, theater calibrated, and I don't have a volume control. I leave it calibrated all the time. I can turn them off, and I can turn them down if I want to, but I don't. I'm always mixing to a calibrated sound. So the dialogue is what I really mix to. The dialogue is what I base everything on, and then music and effects kind of fit into that.
Well, you mentioned that you were, this is the first time you ever worked in 5.1. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And was Premiere easier or what? I mean, did it work with no issues or, of course not, but how was it?
It was fine. It was, sorry, Carl. It was good. That's an area where Adobe needs a little work. I think its competition is a little farther ahead in the 5.1 environment.
But this was the first time you've ever...
Right, and we were 5.1, but basically the way we did 5.1 is that those 4 tracks were routed to the center track. That's it. These tracks, all of your effects and all of your music were sent to your surrounds, or your left and right, and to your surrounds. So, and it worked great 98% of the time. But if I said, I really would love to have that dialogue, am I right? Yeah, that dialogue coming out of the left and right speakers, or I'd like to send them in the back, or I'd like to do something different. That's one thing that Adobe hasn't quite dealt with. Avid and Final Cut X can deal with it great. But it doesn't come up a lot. In fact, it came up very few times. But it was something that I would love to have in the future. But we were 5.1, and I had 5.1. You saw it in that presentation, right? I had my big center speaker and left rights and big surrounds and a big honking subwoofer. It was great.
Well, why was this the first time you've ever used?
I tried to do straight out of Compton. In fact, Universal gave me special equipment to do it. And at that time, Avid was not really, it was awful regarding 5.1. And if your world is set up in 5.1, then if you want to look at your dailies, it would only come to the left side. And it was like, this is too frustrating. So I jettisoned it and just did an LTRT. So it was fine. But they fixed that. Avid has now cleaned that up a lot, and it's a better solution.
Now, being a guy who likes to work with sound, was it fun?
In 5.1?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even though it was a little frustrating here and
No,
there?
it wasn't that it was frustrating, and because, as I said, most of the time I'm not sending someone's dialogue into the rear, or I'm not doing that, but I want to have the ability to do it without doing backflips.
Well, I'm assuming your editing suite had a 5.1 room, right? I mean, you had that sort of feedback, which is...
The thing that was the best, the rear speakers, they're fine. They're whatever. But to be able to have your dialogue in the center and your left and rights, because I'm used to doing LTRT where you're mixing your music, dialogue, and effects into 2 speakers, and that's challenging. And you're always compromising a little bit. To have your dialogue here and everything else out there, it was great.
Also, in the piece that we just showed, the commercial, you suggested that getting up to speed with Premiere was pretty easy because you'd come from Final Cut a lot.
Right.
So what were the similarities between Final Cut and Premiere?
You move from any editing system to another.
I mean, they're all kind of similar, aren't they? I mean,
yes and no.
Other than Final Cut Pro 10, but...
No. But even that. You move from any system to another system. You want to do that function, and you've got to relearn where's that button for that, and you have to get up to speed to that. So that being said, any editing system, you're going to have that problem. The difference between, say, an Avid, and let's start back with Final Cut. When I did my first feature on Final Cut.
Was Trader the first feature?
No,
or was it something else?
It was Black Snake Moan.
Oh, it was. Oh, wow.
And I have done this so many times that I'm used to, it takes about a week, and I'm doing okay. I'm fine. I'm not at speed, but I'm getting through it, and I'm getting faster and faster. My first time on Final Cut, holy shit. It took weeks. Not to learn where the buttons were and how you do a trim and this and that. That wasn't really it. But the difference between, say, Avid and everyone else, and this isn't a criticism, it's merely an is there's a fundamental philosophical difference between how the two edits, those two worlds think. And that's what was the struggle. Once I got Final Cut and I figured out how it works, it was like glass. It was perfect. And then when I had that experience with Final Cut to make the transition to Premiere, which are, I consider them cousins, it was very easy. Then it really purely was a situation of trying to figure out where the buttons were. And it's very close, but you have to do things a little differently. But so the transition from my previous thing I had done on Avid, and then to come on to Premiere, I was fine in 3 or 4 days. Again, not 100% speed, but doing fine.
Okay, so that brings us to the question that everybody wants to know, is the, what do you miss with Premiere that you love about the Avid, because you use the Avid quite a bit?
Medium, actually.
Anything?
Maybe
no,
it
doesn't have an answer.
You know what? They're all good systems, and they each have their features and their tools that are very powerful. Avid is its shared project is very solid and definitely an asset.
Good question, because we're going to segue into that in just a second. So.
I would say that going back to that comment I said about philosophy, again, this isn't a criticism, it's just what it is. I realize that my head works better in a Final Cut Premiere environment than it does in an Avid environment. I'm more comfortable. I'm fine with Avid. I've done a ton of work on an Avid, and I'm doing one right now. I'm doing a feature that we're in the middle of the director's cut. It's fine. If given the choice, no.
Really?
I certainly don't want to go into drill down specifics, but no, I don't think it's a big secret that I'm not the biggest fan.
You're not a fan?
I'm not a fan. I respect it for what it is and that it owns 90+% of the business. But don't tell anybody. But I think it's an old rusty truck.
I mean, how many people here use Premiere? Okay. Wow. How many people here use Avid?
Yeah.
How many people here use Final Cut? All right. Wow. So most of you use all of them, right? So we all have our favorites, right? Billy has his favorites. You have your favorites. We have our favorites.
Right.
That's the way it is.
And you do wish you could take, say, all 3 of those systems and smash them into one, because each one has features that are amazing. There's some amazing features in Final Cut X, and there's some great things in Avid. I have to search a little harder for them, but no, that's really not true.
Honestly, is that some sort of motivator for trying out new stuff?
Well, I don't know if that's...
You just like learning?
I do like learning new pieces of software, absolutely. But I do think it's not that I enjoy learning new pieces of software, which I do. I think you do need to be as relatively... I heard this in one of these meetings. NLE agnostic.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as much as you can, you need to be able to, hey, that's fine. Because you're going to get a call this film's in trouble, this show's in trouble, we're already editing, can you do it on an Avid? Can you do it on a Premiere? Can you do it on a whatever? And you need to be able to say, that's not a problem.
You are more hireable if you're NLE
You are more
agnostic.
hireable if you know it all. And the last thing you want is to have never edited on that system before. And it's interesting, if you're doing a feature, there's a beautiful advantage to features in that, you know, they're off shooting for 3-4 months. I got plenty of time to kind of come up to speed and get to know it. If you're doing an episodic drama, you have 8 days of shooting. You don't have time to learn. You have so much to do on a daily basis. So the more you know going in, and the more you know in terms of each one of those systems, there is a funny thing. I did Compton on Avid, and then I did Only the Brave, Granite Mountain on Premiere. I was only off of Avid for a year and a half, say. Now I'm doing this project on Avid. Holy shit, it's like starting over.
Really?
I was weird that I have done so much work on an Avid.
Yeah, a lot of editors say that. You know, they'll work 6-9 months on one particular
you kind of
system.
forget the muscle memory, but you even forgot, how do I set up my bins? And how do I, oh, right. And I try and save settings and all that, but that doesn't seem to work
Are you
too
a keyboard shortcut guy and you want
Medium.
transfer them over?
No, I never do actually transfer them over, no. But I do put a lot of color things on my keyboard so that it kind of glows a bit. But.
Yeah, I closed down the timeline. I want the back of your head to see see your bald spot.
Yeah, no, that's really gross.
That's your 5-1 room, right?
So that's a 5-1 room, yeah, and you can kind of see that. But what I like my timelines huge, and I don't like to have to zoom around in my timeline. I like to have it up, so I'm always looking from, well, what is I, 20 tracks of audio and 6 tracks of picture. I like to have them all visible all the time.
Is that a tangent ripple?
Yes, that is incredible, thanks to Carl.
Yeah,
who let me borrow it.
And it's also incredibly cheap.
Yeah.
It's really affordable.
It's really, and I gotta say, how it works with Premiere, it's astounding. It's just sitting there, and you're editing away, and you see something you want to adjust, and you can set up those wheels and the balls to your liking. And I have a setting, and I just reach over and lower it a little, and I'm done. I don't even have to go into a color correction zone or anything. It's just, and you just keep editing.
Oh, wow. So you do color correction too.
You know what? Here's the thing about color correction. I love color correction. I love doing it. I enjoy the technique. I don't have time. It is the one thing that just falls off the table between editing and then sound and then music and then I also...
There are other people that are supposed to do that.
What?
Color correction and sound and sound effects and visual effects, but Billy wants to do it all.
Kind of.
Yeah,
I do love the visual effects. I came from a visual effects background.
I mean, you don't want to show your director that cut without all that really groovy stuff that makes it look good.
Yeah.
And makes it sound good.
Well, it makes your cut better, and it makes your life easier, and it starts building on itself. And if the director's feeling good about it, and your previews are stronger, and it just grows from there.
Yeah, speaking of that, because it was touched on that commercial, was your previews were much stronger because you gave them a DCP, it was color corrected, the sound was good, the special effects, everything was in there.
But the big thing about that is what Jamie said, that it's a 72-hour turnaround from editing and then having a DCP in your hand that you can be showing just a screening, let alone a preview. And what that affords us is 3 more days of editing. And your cut. I have many times, they had to make the DCP. Well, I kept editing. And now I'm in the preview. 3 days later, I'm going, oh my God, that scene doesn't even look like that anymore. And now you don't have to deal with that because you can be editing until 8 o'clock at night. And then Jamie will make the DCP, you watch it in the morning, and you're good to go.
How important are those preview numbers, those 80s versus 90s? Which is really hard to get, obviously, the 90s.
You want to know what we did on Granite Mountain?
I think I heard.
We had 2 previews. And
two previews? Only two?
We only had 2 previews. And our first preview was in 91. They would have been thrilled with a 75. and we got a 91, and then we went back and did a couple of tweaks, nothing huge, and we got a 96. And the guy who runs the previews says, you don't see numbers like this very often. And so it was great.
You know, I remarked at the beginning of this, I love this movie, and anybody who has actually seen it will also love this movie. Did you get emotionally involved while cutting this movie? I know you're very far away because you're thinking about just the cuts, but do you get emotionally involved in this true story?
Funnily enough, we were on this for a year, and you do get a little numb to it. And you do have to pinch yourself and realize what had happened. I use the exact same chops, the same foundation in editing that as I did when I did Band of Brothers, in that the fire or the battles are ultimately boring. They're exciting, they're fine for a little while, but what makes these movies much more emotional and where the so-called payoff is connecting the brothers, connecting each one of those characters together and making it so that you feel like you know them and you know their little personalities and how they connect, and so that when down the road, when things start to turn, you have a sense of loss. And if you don't spend the time working on that, you'll go, that was a really good movie, but I don't know, the ending was not so great. And
well, speaking of that, the ending, you cut the ending before you cut anything else. You made a suggestion. Let's cut the final scene, the big scene, the one with the big fire, and let's cut that, and then we'll go back and cut the rest of it.
So the editor's cut was, what is it? It was like 3:15, something like that, and most of the big visual effects, like all that fire running over the ground, there was no fire on the ground. And ILM needed those turned over as quickly as possible. So, and there was so much of that. There was so much of that in those final 24 minutes that was in Joe's head. And I tried to build it the best I could. But again, so much of it was in his head. Like there's this shot of a hillside, and it's just there. And I go, Joe, what am I supposed to do with this? And he goes, oh, that's where a whole fire comes around the corner. Oh. And he tried to explain it to me while he was shooting, and it just wasn't working out. So I suggested to him, let's spend the first couple of weeks doing the end of the movie. So for two reasons. One, we know what the ending looks like. We know what's done. ILM will be a lot happier because they can start working on their visual effects.
Yeah, that was a brilliant suggestion.
It's almost like you've already climbed the mountain. So for us to then go to the top of the movie and start working towards that middle point, it's a great relief to know that it's been handled and it's out of the way. Not to say that we didn't go back to it and tweak on it a lot. We did tweak on it a little. But it was nice to have it. It's like the term paper. I got the term paper out of the way. Now I can work on the smaller stuff.
But you've done this in other movies too, right? You've taken the big parts and done that first.
Try and do it, yeah.
Yeah, I just think it's a great idea.
Yeah, it really works. It's good on a lot of different levels.
Hey, Justin or Brandon or somebody could. We're going to have to set up a microphone stand over there. If you guys can do this. Right now, and I'll ask a couple of more questions. One of the things I love about you, and I've read tons of interviews, and I've seen you on line with this. You're very articulate about the craft of acting. It's the craft of editing. It's very difficult to say to people what it is that you do for a living, and be able to put it into words that people can understand. And you said in an interview with Steve Hullfish, he says, I think the key thing that makes a really good editor is not what you edit in, but it is what you leave out.
Right. Yeah.
And that goes back to that daily thing where you want to slap it all together and just come up with that first cut before you get to the directing. Okay,
Yeah.
let's refine this and make it brilliant.
I look upon
That's
it.
when the world changes, as you say.
I look upon it that an editor's the editor's job is interesting in that you try and explain to people, what does an editor do? And well, the director shoots all of this wide shot and close-ups and overs and 50-50s and stuff, and then you cut it how you like it, and they go, oh, okay, I think I get it, I think I understand it. Well, that isn't editing at all, because I think that part of the editing process is like, I consider it like breathing. What shots you use, kind of what performances you use, is almost an automatic thing. You better know how to just do that, and that just happens, as far as I'm concerned. It just happens. What really makes, I think, a picture editor in a TV show or a feature is more akin to a story editor at a publishing house, in that they take, your job really kicks in when you have, as you were saying, the whole body, and you start deciding what you extract and where you maybe move things around, or maybe you leave the scene early, or what. That's what I think an editor's job, and what makes a great editor, and understands the storytelling heartbeats and knows when to accelerate, when to hit the gas, and when to hit the brakes.
Yeah, when you also ask an editor what is a well-edited film, it's usually the answer is, well, if I notice an edit, it's
exactly.
not a well-edited film. However,
there are exceptions.
But your wife came up with a really good paragraph, a pretty line, that I really absolutely love. And she did an article with you on Adobe, and she says, a well-edited film is like a well-written book. The writing or the movie theater disappears. We're engrossed in the journey. We care about the characters as we travel with them. We laugh or cry or jump in fear or exhale with relief because we are there. We relate to the beautiful cinematography as part of the story. We connect clues or plot twists in delighted aha moments. And that's a well-edited movie.
Well, when Adobe, I point to Carl again. He's like, I consider him Adobe. When Adobe had me go over to Amsterdam for the IBC, there was a conversation on the theme. What are we going to talk about? And we talked about a couple of different ideas, and all of them kind of sucked. And Serena just came up with she observed that if I'm driving home from working, she says, you oftentimes will say, well, today was a good day because I think I sensed a heartbeat.
Yeah.
And it can be really early in the editorial process, but you start to feel that it's a person, but it's not alive and it's just developing, but you feel like there's something happening here. And then that grows, and as you continually every day pound on it more and more, that heartbeat becomes a stronger and stronger reality. And then she actually observed this. I didn't even really notice it. She goes, that process of finding the heartbeat, and then at a certain point, you go through a director's cut, your job moves from finding the heartbeat to preserving the heartbeat, because then you go through all the craziness of trimming it to time and studio notes and preview notes and all of this stuff which tend to try and take the heartbeat away.
Obviously, projects are proposed to you. Some you say yes to, some you might say no to. Sometimes when we're coming up, we take any project that comes our way because we need to make the rent and we want more experience. But how do you decide? And there are good projects, there are bad projects. It's subjective, and they happen on a small level and they happen on a very big level. So how do you decide that this is a project you want to take on, this is a project where I feel, yes, that heartbeat is going to exist, we're going to be able to find that? What goes into that process?
So much in terms of the heartbeat or how good a thing turns out, you have no idea. But to speak to your question, I say no so often. And
Really?
I'd say no all the time. I'm constantly, and in fact, to the point where my agents.
I know. I've been trying to get him to LACPUG for like 2 years. And
That's
he's always
not
saying
true.
no.
That's not true. I love doing this. You know, the way it works is if a director is interested in me being one of the 8 people he's interviewing, I'm sent a script, and usually my agent or agents will read it and they go, no, he's not interested in that, you know. But if it gets to me, I read it, and I've read a million that I just, oh, this is good, this kind of sucks, and I pass. And but you've got to want to do it, and particularly for an editor who's on a film for such a long period of time. The few times, fortunately, that I've taken a show, sometimes it's for political reasons, can also be for money, it's not worked out. It's not worked out because what I notice is that after a period of time, I'm fine for a while, and then I get to a point where I can't focus on the movie anymore. I can't watch it. I mean, think about how many times you watch it. I mean, like 3 times in a day. And so you've got to love it. And if you don't love it, then you're not doing anyone any favors. So it all comes from the gut. You got to read it, you got to like it, and then, you know, hopefully they'll like you. So.
Hey, Billy, thanks for being here with us tonight. How much of your sound design is actually making it through to the sound designer, or this? Are you going to the stage? Are you heartbroken when they just wipe it off the timeline?
No. In terms of the amount of work I do on a sound level, virtually none of it lives. Because it can't. Because they're, you know, using much more sophisticated filters, and they're using much more, and different sound effects. And so, no, unfortunately, virtually none of it is, lives in the final. But what I look upon in terms of what I do and my team does is, be it certainly the picture editing, that's easy, that's a frame. But sound, color correction, visual effects, we temp in exactly what we're looking for. They're going to make it better, and they're going to use better visual effects tools, better sound devices, filters, mixing, blah, 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 you know, Atmos and the whole schmear. Color correction, so much more than we can do. And certainly being that we're dealing in a 2K file and they're dealing in a 4K RAW. So none of what we do lives, but what I want to be able to do is hand off exactly what we want.
Hi, my question is, you said you like trying out new softwares,
Yeah.
and you also like color correction a lot.
Yeah.
Have you thought about trying DaVinci Resolve as an editing platform?
Good question. I was going to ask that.
Absolutely. And I've been keeping my eye on that one too. I think it's just early on. I like the people at Resolve. I got a great demo from Paul Ciccone. I think it's a very interesting product. And it's funny, as I said, I think their color correction is one of the best in the business, but I never have time for it. But I'm going to keep my eye on it and keep watching its development. I don't know enough about it to really say that it's ready or not. I know that they've done some great work.
Thank
you. I'm a syndication editor who cuts movies down for television. And it's funny when you mention about the pulse and the heartbeat. It's like, yeah, when I have to cut stuff for time, it's like I want to always make sure that, you know, I keep the base of the movie. But do you ever watch TV cuts of your movie, and what do you think of people like me?
I think that you have to do it. The thing that's interesting is movies like, for example, Hustle and Flow, which we had like 2,000 shits and fucks in it. And just I saw a cut down of that, and that was pretty unique. I think that most of the time, the work I've seen, and I can't say that I've seen a lot, but the time it's pretty impressive. It's very seamless, and you guys know what you're doing, and I know that's a whole art into itself, because you don't get the extra frames. You don't get you only get what's in the cut. You can't say, oh, if we only had 4 more frames, that cut would be so much better. No.
Hi, I'm Jeremiah.
Hi, Jeremiah.
A lot of people have told me that the path to being an editor, you always have to be an AE first. Was that the case for you?
No. No. I was an editor down in San Diego doing commercials, then I came up to Los Angeles, worked for NBC as an editor, doing sports and news, and then went freelance. No, I never was an assistant. But I do agree with what you're saying. It is the path. In my case, it was harder because when I first started, there was I never cut film. So there was electronic editing, and that's like TV-ish. And then there's, dramas and features, and those are done on film. And I was over here, and those were over there, and eventually the river that separated it dried up, and then it had happened. But no, in my case, I never.
Did you always want to be in scripted?
Yeah, I wanted. Yeah, well, I wanted to. Yes, I did. Yeah, I was trying to define it, but yes, you're right. I did.
I always thought that you had like the coolest name ever, and you should be playing shortstop for the Red Sox because it's like Billy Fox, and you were groomed to play baseball, but yet you got into editing.
Yeah. No, I actually always wanted to be an editor.
Really?
I actually, since I was a little kid, when my dad was a general manager of a TV station down there, and he, when I was, I don't know, probably about 11, he bought me a little Sony tape recorder, a little reel-to-reel, and there was a radio station associated to the station he managed, and he would bring home commercials of reels of audio, and I came up with this thing called editing, and I started editing audio and doing all this crazy stuff, and then a couple years later he kept feeding me more batteries and more tape, and then he said, well, I got to get you one that you plug in, and I kept cutting. And so it's always been a love of editing. I love the process. I love what it is, and a love of great cinema, or cinema. I just love watching movies and great TV and well done drama.
Hi, my name is Kenny, and my question is, what inspires you when you start doing a film? Because you have two different, like the last two ones that you did, compared to like Straight Outta Compton to Only the Brave. They're two different cultures. You have, Compton to Arizona forest fires.
Right.
Like, what inspires you to basically get you in the right mood for cutting that story?
Well, I get bored, and so I don't like to do the same thing-ish. But I do love music, and I enjoy doing music shows. It's not like I want to do a musical or do Beauty and the Beast. That would be fine actually, but it's not the area. I think the music things that I've done live in an area that they're drama that have music in it. Mm-hmm. But I also like to do, as my daughter calls it, he likes black and white films where everyone dies. And it's kind of true. So, yeah.
Hey, I'm Chris.
Hey, Chris.
Hey, so when you have a 3.5 or 3 and 15 minutes, first cut, is there a tension within you if you know it's going to be closer to 2:15? And having worked on TV shows and films, I've found myself in places with a lot of patience for it and places where I don't have a lot of patience for it. So within you, what are you feeling, between that first cut and where you think it's going to end up?
I'm not sure if I'll be answering your question exactly. My experience from doing a lot of television, and I was on Law and Order for 10 years, is that technique of, the number is the number, and you have to hit the number regardless of how over you are. And the tool set that you learn and gain from little tricks that you can do with losing very little lines of dialogue, to a point you start to lose the heartbeat if you're not careful. But then I was very fortunate to work with a great producer who's actually still working at Wolf Films. His name's Arthur. And Arthur had this technique where he could watch a scene and the scene's going along and you're watching it and he goes, okay, bullshit, 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 bullshit. Okay, you're back in right there. I go, wow. That's pretty cool. And I learned a lot from Arthur and the people I learned at Wolf Films. What focus, as I said earlier, about you're more of a story editor. It's not cameras. It's not close-up wide shot. It's what's bullshit, what's driving the story, and what's needed and what's not.
Yeah.
Last two questions.
Oh, okay, sure.
Hi, I'm Relly, and I heard you say before that you like to do visual effects in your editing.
Mm-hmm.
How much visual effects do you do in the editing process, and what tools do you use to do that?
Okay, I enjoy it immensely, and again, it falls into that category that I end up with not a lot of time. And what I normally do is, if I need to do relatively straightforward, I can't spend 4 hours doing a visual effect. But if I want to do a split screen where it's actually camera moving, and I love to stabilize both shots and then track it and then put the move back on it and those kinds of things. I actually for years used Motion, Apple's Motion, and I very much enjoyed that. I have not used After Effects as much as I should. I just don't have the time. But I want to. I want to get faster on it and better at it and be comfortable with it.
Okay.
Hey, man.
Billy.
Hi.
Like you, I consider myself platform agnostic, but I'm kind of curious when you were talking about moving from platform to platform, when you mentioned the way you used to do your performance edits. And one of the things that I consider a strength of Media Composer are being able to make trims or audition various lines like through script sync in real time. And I'm wondering how important to you in your editing process is making decisions in real time versus making a decision and then going back to review that decision.
It's not that important, and I have to say I've never used script sync. Probably because all of my assistants would kill me. But I do know it's an incredibly powerful asset. And I've just never used it. But
Not so much script sync per se, but just making the decisions while playing, as opposed to kind of making a decision, stopping, and then going back to see what you've done.
I just do it quickly, you know? I can tell if I like it, and I can rough it in really quickly to see if it kind of works, and then smooth it out. So, yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks, Steve. Everybody, please thank Billy Fox.